Welcome to the new Kevin Smith show, The Great Witness Is, the new adventure series is. I'm Dean Bell, your host, and the star of the show, Kevin, here, is here with us today to share his real side experiences. It's March 30th, 2022. And welcome, Kevin, and look forward to hearing your experiences here.
This real side experience would open up in an open, natural, countryside setting. If it was an actual place on the physical level, I'm uncertain, but I had never seen it before, or rather, the location was lacking from my current personal self-mind of lifetime references, although really nothing very remarkable about it, in that nothing of it was especially unique or would stand out and differentiate it from any other natural, open countryside area. Could it have been a position, an area of natural environment, somewhere in the multi-dimensional life levels of the real side of creation? Again, quite possibly. Or maybe even another physical level planet. But if that were the case, it was remarkably Earth planet-like, the kind of plants, vegetation, typical to this planet. It's quite possible it was a simulated spot, as created by the real guides, just as an area to utilize, for whatever reasons it was required. If something is created by an individual on the real side, it is rather created within the overall simulated arena that their consciousness is a part of effecting. And as their consciousness is a part, in that it is a part of the overall consciousness, an overall consciousness that is and affects the overall simulator, then the ideas shared through this overall consciousness affect a shared, affected simulator arena, which has then all individuals potentially able to enter the simulated presence of any other. All consciousness affects a kind of a foundation simulated platform, affects also all the body vehicles that inhabit it, and the awareness that is through all the body vehicles experiences this overall arena, the is really experiencing itself, the all awareness that it is segregated into individual body forms, but all the body forms that are operating within a simulator that the consciousness of each combines to effect. Almost like a house that is the sum of the bricks that make up its construction. Each brick is a part of the effecting of the house, and each brick then operates within the same effected reality that the house represents. And within this base template, this simulated arena, all consciousness has the shared ideas that effect it into a being. For if a consciousness did not have these same simulator baseline affecting ideas, it would not be able to generate the simulation that the shared consciousness, which has these shared ideas that affect the overall baseline arena, does, and so can't participate in the same simulator overall, like wearing a virtual reality headset, that to experience a certain simulator, so must the template, the foundation stadium, be uploaded to the technology of the headset, like files on a computer, then placing on the virtual reality headset, awareness then stepping into the consciousness, the headset, a consciousness that also affects the body of vehicles that have the mechanics to decode these files into a simulation, so the simulator can be experienced. And as it is the overall consciousness that has the shared ideas that affect the simulator, these shared ideas that then affect a shared arena overall, as we are to experience that particular simulator, we install these same shared ideas that we can experience the same simulator, and so our consciousness is rather intertwined with all consciousness that affects the same simulator by virtue of these shared ideas. It's like wanting to play a certain multiplayer computer game. You have to download the game to your computer. You have to install the same ideas that all other players have downloaded that allow them to operate in the game and to effect a character or avatar into the game by which to directly experience it through. And it is then a game overall arena shared by all who have installed the same ideas or files that allow them to play it, and all participants potentially can encounter each other within the particular game overall arena. And then within this overall shared baseline foundation, that all consciousness shares the ideas that effect into a being, so the individual participants create individually as they do. For it is a simulator where we can create anything through the activation of ideas, agreements that are in addition to the consciousness baseline simulator affecting ideas. But because the simulator template, the empty stage, if you will, the ideas that affect it always are maintained, anything we add in addition, idea-wise, are always within this overall shared arena. We build our show on or within the overall stage, add our props, create our scenery, etc. And so what we create will always be within the overall simulator arena, that potentially all other participants whose consciousness is a part of can experience. But what can happen is that an individual, say a guide, can create something simulated, utilize a consciousness mechanic to do so, like constructing your own virtual reality game. But if the guides have not a consciousness, or are utilizing one that is a part of a particular overall consciousness, then what they create can be that which doesn't feature within an overall simulator arena. A little like making a private game that isn't automatically accessible to all others, and the only way it is accessible to others is if the ideas, the files that make up this private game are provided, and then we can agree with these idea files, like temporarily adding a separate game to our usual simulator game and experience whatever it is the guides have constructed. This is how we can have experiences that cannot be infringed upon by others, all those who can readily and potentially observe or enter any simulated creation we might make, as we always are resigned to creating within the overall shared arena. As always, we are operating with a consciousness mechanic that is a part of an overall consciousness, but with mechanics not a part of a consciousness overall collective. The only ones that can participate will be those provided the files to agree with and then experience. I have found this to be so with the universal Unuversities, the genuine ones. They are by special invite only, and are not operating in the overall simulator arena for all to see, but rather are effected from mechanics that are in isolation of any collective consciousness, and so, as I said, like a private game that you need be invited to. And so we can have our real side experiences that are within the overall simulator and the dimensions of it, but that can also potentially have constant interference and infringement that we also must deal with, or the guides can afford us creations of their own that are designed to provide a certain representation for our awareness process that then will lack any additional detail, any additional infringement that might distract or obfuscate from what the guides wish to convey, or indeed such isolated, private, simulated areas can be used for meetings and engagements, discussion, etc., that again will be beyond any interference. But anyway, wherever this natural environment was, its layout was as two large grassy areas separated by a raised hill that intersected them. I wouldn't just be observing what was taking place, but involved and inserted into the simulated situation, as we can just witness any simulation as effected from the ideas of any consciousness through a real awareness that is a part of all awareness, is through all consciousness then, and the personal self be shown anything that the overall consciousness of ideas comprises of now, and from this position we are operating aside from the simulation. For to be inserted in it, we must agree with the ideas that effect into whatever it is we wish to be directly involved with. For if we agree with the ideas that make up any simulation, we must then experience it. And if we don't, if we are not in agreement with any idea, we are this real awareness, everything a view, where everything simulated can be shown the personal self, without direct involvement and active participation. So, in this experience, agreement to the ideas that effected into this particular simulated situation was so. The real awareness always finding the necessary ideas that through agreement can have the personal self participating in whatever it is the real awareness or the guides deem as being beneficial awareness-wise to do so. If it is an occurrence within the overall simulator, as really most experiences will be, then really it's just a case of stepping into the agreement with the consciousness that then has us experiencing this overall shared simulator that our consciousness is a part of effecting. Or if it is situations that are as enclosed, simulated, isolated bubbles, as individuals can create such encasements on the real side, still within the overall simulator arena, but it's as though they are self-limited in what they are deciding to be able to perceive. And so, should we want to directly engage with them, we need that they either extend agreement to the idea of our personal self, that it is uploaded as an idea to their enclosed bubble illusion, and they then can perceive us, or we find agreement that already exists between their consciousness and ours, or through agreements shared with third parties that amount to the same effect, agreement to the idea of our personal self that allows it to operate in such enclosed simulations of illusion. If person A has agreement with person B, but person A doesn't have agreement with person C, but if person C has agreement with person B, that person A also has agreement with, then in fact person A agrees with person C, even if they don't realize this, because the idea of a person C is installed as an idea agreement into the consciousness of person B, and inadvertently person A has extended agreement then to person C, as a person B's consciousness comprises also of the idea of person C. Anyway, this situation seemed to be a huge gathering, millions of various assorted beings and body types, I didn't take the time to really focus and determine all species, but they were varied, everything from humans to reptilians, etc. Overall, though, my impressions through the real awareness, as the real awareness always can read every idea, including intent, that is behind every affected, simulated situation, was that every being here were those stepping up, those becoming more aware at various stages of their respective awareness processes, and assisting overall with the galactic situations and endeavours as decided by Duane and backed by the guides and the ease. For indeed, I would be rather positioned on the hilled section that separated the two grassy areas below, that I had a good expansive view of all the body types and beings that filled the two areas, and on one side of the partition sat with a group of individuals that my impressions afforded me were the guides, would be Duane, and it was as though a gathering, all the beings agreeable, and in support of what Duane was orchestrating and deciding in regards to the galactic situations, and helping to offset not just the plight of Earth, but of the entire simulator. It was rather set up as though there were to be continuous talks and presentations by the guides and Duane to these agreeable and assorted beings, as though all were waiting in eager anticipation for them to either begin or to continue. It was an overall sense and impression that great progress was being made, and that all these individuals would be very instrumental in playing their parts in regards to the sharing and promoting of the ease and the galactic operations with the species they represented. Quite noticeable was how a fair proportion of those in attendance were Native American Indians, most of which were adorned in their full regalia, and indeed a group of Native Americans that my impressions revealed were the most aware were sat with the guides and Duane. For Duane has said how the Native Americans have much by way of interdimensional connections with the various species, and should they step up more so, they will be very influential in the galactic affairs. It was always a case of gleaning their trust, as they are rather somewhat attitude-driven, due to what they had experienced in creation at the hands of the white man, etc. Understandably so, but then all they are doing by retaining such attitudes and ideas is self-limiting themselves. To hold on to distorted idea considerations in response to experience has the effects that follow, and individuals can lock themselves into these ideas for lifetimes, which will continuously limit their ability to see anything beyond that which they cling to. for I have had a number of real side experiences with the Native Americans, and slowly I can see how they are opening up more so from the ideas they have limited themselves with. Indeed, they have been and are relentlessly aggravated and attacked on the real side, and a few experiences involved groups and myself, assisting them as they suffered at the hands of the dark forces. We must remember that anything we do experience is based on what we have decided to, and the dark forces certainly have managed to mould the overall consciousness to agree to ideas that allow their constant domination and power over all in the simulator. Nevertheless, the only way to deal with this overall situation is not to engage with it, to oppose it, as this is simply another form of agreement to the controllers. As we engage with ideas, we engage with and agree to the idea creators, as you can't have an idea without the source from which it came from, which are the controllers with their controlling intent inclinations. And so, inadvertently, if we oppose a dark force idea, if we fight it, we are agreeing to it in order to experience the simulation of doing so. For how can you fight something without accepting it into your experience, agreeing to it, and in actuality then we have agreed to that which generated the idea, a controlling consciousness, and agreeing to ideas of control intent translates as experience of being controlled, as we simply upload whatever the idea is and experience its nature, and intent and consciousness, if agreed with, as we engage with the ideas created from it, are ideas that must then have us experience their design. And so the solution cannot be to engage with any idea unless we want to experience its nature and that which created it, but rather to sidestep all ideas and release agreement with the consciousness, a process, if taken to its conclusion, will have nothing of the ideas that make up its construction then able to have a bearing on our experience. A controller can't kill us now, as we have not the agreements clung to that afford permission that this can be so. But it's a process, and takes the moments it will, as we face the consciousness and let its ideas go. And for all those who do step up, so they are more so, less and less impacted by the dark forces adversely, as they release agreements that facilitate this. The dark forces will still attack, but the success of their attacks is agreement dependent, an agreement contract with all the particulars established between attacker and victim. And so this real side situation was promising, as though the Native Americans in vast numbers were coming on board and suggesting that certain of them were excelling with their awareness process, sitting with Duane and the guides as they were, and part of the delivery of the presentations and talks being shared here. Indeed, some of the Native Americans would recognize me and raise their hands in greetings, for with my dealings with them and the assistance I and the groups had afforded them had us more so accepted by them, and although the personal self didn't recognize them, the recognition that I had association with them was so through the real awareness that has access to every detail, all the details the personal self may miss, as visually we can only take in, remember so much, etc., through the personal self. Interestingly, my form was somewhat different, my hair a little longer than usual, and a dazzling golden colour, tied into a ponytail. So, perchance, what transpired here is indication of things moving along beneficially, and we will see what comes of this. There was a separate scene also, where it was as though, as an extension of the speaking and presenting event just recounted, where I would find myself in a vast building, and where were placed various stalls, and again where presentations in regards to the references of the ears were taking place, as various individuals were conducting these mini talks, and all the stalls were promoting and providing Duane's new books to all the beings who were visiting. An enthusiastic buzz in the air, and indeed this building was packed with, I would say, the comings and goings of millions of beings, all open and agreeable to seeing and being more, stepping up, and wanting to read Duane's books. And so a grand overall real side presentation, and one that was being very well and extensively received by vast numbers. Also would be a scene that followed, where I would now be in the company of a group, all of the awareness becoming stepping up persuasion. The impressions of the situation were that we were creating something that was beneficial overall, but the creation was such that it would open us up to attacks and confrontation with various creationally powerful demonic type beings. For as we decide certain things, as we create what we do, as we share and promote the ears, we invariably come up against resistance in all its forms. As many ill-intended beings will be disgruntled with those who are creating in such a way or promoting the ears that rather upsets the status quo. The status quo being a controlled simulator by the overall dark forces in all their expressions and body types. There will always be agreements in anyone's consciousness that involve acquiescence to the power and control of others, agreements secured whenever they were, and until faced and released, potentially such beings can take advantage of these agreements, enter our experience at any time, and impose upon us in accordance with the specifics of the agreement parameters we have with them. Some of these creationally powerful demonic beings have been in operation for eons, and indeed, with an intent to be controlling, have trawled endless agreement, much like the controllers, to their power over others. But where the controllers are constant in their infringements, some of these demon characters rather don't commit, don't involve or attack others unless they deem it necessary, and many of these demonic beings are rather almost forgotten in the mists of time, so to speak. But these demonic beings are the kind of characters who have trawled agreement to their power through worship, etc., in eons gone by, and you see various depictions of them worshipped as gods by the controllers of today, Molech, Nimrod, etc., etc. They rather keep themselves to themselves. But as I said, as we face the whole of creation and promote the ears, it's only a matter of time before we irritate these oftentimes rather reclusive demons, and they will make themselves known and may attack us consequently. For as I have gone through my process, I have encountered all manner of creationally manipulating skilled beings, and had confrontations with them that very likely I would never have had if I had not decided to undergo this awareness process, as they would have likely have considered any one-dimensional, personal self-immersed individual an irrelevance, and not worthy of their time. And again, with everything agreement dependent, regardless of how powerful these demons are, they need our agreement that they can harm or dominate us. And even if such agreements had been present, and at any moment potentially can be utilized by them, the process of awareness is a releasing of all these agreements, that eventually we are untouchable by any being in creation. And so this was the overall impression, that what we were doing had rather irritated an array of very powerful demonic type beings. Visually, the experience presented as the group and I stirring large pots full of liquid, as though making soup or something, the making of or preparing a meal representing often the creating of an idea, and according to the ingredients or food stuff can reveal the nature of it. Is it a healthy food, and therefore a beneficial idea, or the opposite. And so, that was one layer of the representation. We were preparing a beneficial idea, but the impressions in regards to how it was annoying certain demons, and that they were preparing to attack, stemmed rather from the real awareness impressions, and backed up by other visuals that represented this situation. For from our pots would emerge various creatures, squid-like beings, snakes, but despite having generally forms that made sense to the personal self, although some did not, all would have additional features. Some would have unnatural colours, some would be glowing or exuding certain nuances of light, etc. As I said, this represented these demonic characters coming to the fore, but their general size, that of smallish creatures, did indicate their rather lack of power over us, which suggested we either lacked agreements to their power, or they had been present and we had released them. Either way, they were unable to exact harm upon us consequently. And it was as though also, not only were our actions or creations inciting these powerful demons, but that it was designed to, as though it was always their choice to be abrasive, but that by doing so they would effect for themselves karma that could then be managed also creatively. The same way the guides can throw individuals into the phantom zone, an alternative effect than just having the individual meet the reflection of their poor life choices as experience in creation. Again, nothing the individual hadn't actually decided for themselves, just that the effects can be managed in such a way, and often at times the guides allow attacks to take place for this reason, as they now have karmic leverage. This was a similar situation. We were creatively managing the effects of the demons' choices to attack us in their decided response to whatever we were creating that had incited them, and it was as though, as these demons emerged from the liquid of our pots in their various forms, we were containing each of them in turn, rendering them unable to not only attack us, but anyone in creation for that matter, a kind of a version of the phantom zone, in a way that was hard to describe, but were my impressions. We were nullifying and putting on ice these always potentially abrasive and creationally powerful demons, getting them out of the way, for as things progress with the galactic activities, they undoubtedly would be motivated to interfere, so this was deemed necessary. At one point, a demon emerged from my pot that was especially powerful, and I had a job containing it. I was holding it in my hands. Visually, it was a kind of electric, blue, sparking, frozen, lightning, Z-shape like creature. And indeed, another individual would step in and assist. My impressions were that the individual was a guide, as the guides had been present with us this whole time, and overseeing our activities and demon baiting. Prior to this scene, I had been briefly in my recreated physical level house, which represents the consciousness. My hands had grown into oversized fists, and I had been smashing holes in the house walls. This was overseen by another individual who, again, my impressions revealed, was a guide. Generally, house alterations, or even the demolishing, removing of parts of it, represent a refining, realigning of the ideas that make up the consciousness construction that are then beneficial for our awareness process. And I have shared experiences of this nature, where sometimes it is the guides, with my agreement, doing such. Everything from the guides removing the roof, to a guide sitting in a bulldozer and bulldozing down the walls. For if you alter the consciousness, this must effect then altered experience, as experience is effected from the idea agreements the consciousness comprises of. In this case then, I surmise, I was making adjustments in such a way, punching holes in the walls with my oversized fists, that what I was punching out were then the ideas I was removing. That would make it so that the scene that followed, where we were demon baiting, could be executed without incident or issue. Evidently these ideas, being punched out of the house walls, were idea agreements that were perhaps affiliated with the very demons who would likely attack us, in regards then to permissions dictating their ability to do so. A necessary preparation then, or our containment of the demons, may not have gone so smoothly, and they might not have been portrayed as small, easy to handle creatures. And even then, the blue spark demon was almost beyond my ability to deal with, so perhaps I missed a spot in my house, but the guide was there to pick up the slack. Nevertheless, overall, we were successful. Every demon choosing to assail us was contained and put out of the way, and then the group and I would sit around in a discussion with the guides. I was telling them how I had had a number of entity-related infringements throughout my process. Of course, the guides knew this, and also revealed how my dabbling generally in the psychic sciences throughout all my lifetimes always had me in bother with entities and beings of that nature, but only now, with my process of releasing agreements to the power of such beings over me, is their imposition, if indeed they choose to impose, of little concern. Interestingly, I had a book that seemed to have all my real side experiences contained within it, and specifically in regards to those involving entities and other creationally disruptive beings, and much more besides, almost like a handheld version of the Akashic files, or perhaps universal files, regarding my experiences throughout my stay in the simulator on the physical and the real side. There was something special about the book, something I recognized at the time, but was unable to bring back on awaking. But I remember the book had the date of 1974, as though suggesting this as the time of its writing. Rather a prophetic book then, citing experiences I hadn't as yet had, since it was written in 1974. And indeed, I wasn't even born till 1978. But then prophecy is simply agreements that have not as yet come to pass on the physical, but are in effect now on the real side life is, as all ideas created instantly are. And if an intent is placed, the culmination of it already is complete, and the personal self just goes through the simulation to that end, and assuming the intent is maintained, the journey will continue to what already is in reality an intent actualized. And it would be so with the real intent, that of is recognition also, that if maintained, all simulation will roll out to that end. And maybe this book then simply represented a certain intent placement, cemented whenever it was, that would at the very least have all the experiences yet to come in regards to entities, demons, the ill-intended, and whatever else details the book contained, from the perspective position of 1974 already in place. For if I place an intent, the intent actualized, and everything that leads to it is present and here and now, and I must just go through the process, the simulated, mapped out journey, mapped out according to my intent. So perhaps it was a book that mapped out cemented, simulated experience through a certain cemented intent that involved experience pertaining to certain types of beings, an intent then that would play out accordingly with experience with entities in particular this lifetime. I also would be answering a number of questions from an individual present, but that was not part of the overall group in the experience, as though she were gathering certain ideas, references, then would be on her way, and indeed, when her questioning was complete, she would depart. She was an individual of sincerity, not ill-intended or harbouring agenda though she represented a group of individuals who were affiliated with a created spiritual idea path I once was involved with, but no longer, as though perhaps she was open to references aside from the ideas of her creationally based spiritual path, and willing to convey what I told her to this overall spiritual group she was representing. As I said, I answered much by way of queries regarding a creation, its overall design, structure, and mechanics. She wanted to know about ghosts and also werewolves. For whatever reason, such subject matter held interest for her, and there the experience would end. So a busy, real side night of activity, an overall promising situation, with all the escalating agreement to what Duane is deciding with the Native Americans, etc., and all the various assorted species, and a little demonic containing, to get some more of the abrasively driven and inclined interfering individuals out of the way.
The adventure is really to see, like, things you see manifest, whether you decide them or not. You can decide them, or you can see them and then have them manifest. That's really an adventure in its own way. And I'm not talking about, creating things. This is like seeing things as they are, and then seeing them in the physical. That's an adventure. And again, it's not creating things. That's different. You create things out of your imagination, and seeing them manifest. That's different than what I'm talking about. It's just seeing things as they are and then seeing them here. That's more along the lines of what we're doing with the new presentation. And yes, we're in the simulator, we're in creation, so everything here is created by somebody, and we're just agreeing to it. Some in a small way, some in a big way, but everything's been created here. This is creation. That's why it's called creation. So people think of it as a reality, but it's actually an agreed upon simulator. And you had a lot there. So the personal self can be influenced by the personal self can influence the real awareness, because this place is really thick with attitudes and emotions and energy, negative particularly. So the real awareness can be influenced in a way from the personal awareness, personal self. How it can be influenced is, well, it's not aware of certain things, that it could be. And also the tap lines affect the real awareness from seeing more. And the personal self picks these up and then infects the real awareness in a way. We have, and then the meeting there with Duane and the millions of people. I mean, this is like, this is again March 30th, 2022. We're close to the funding, it looks like. So when that happens, it's going to be a huge, huge wake up. I mean, for people. I mean, beyond anybody's consideration or imagination, how this could mean. Look at Duane, one person with his awareness, what he's doing. Think if there's more people with awareness, how that could affect the simulation. People were really waking up. Look back to the Tartarians and how they were breatharians, so to speak. They could project, could relate to aliens. I mean, all kinds of things are possible with awareness. We're trapped here in this one-dimensional world that's been marketed to be reality. So once people start waking up to more of their potential, who knows? It's creation, so we can create anything we want here with agreement. We saw something, it was on Netflix last night, the Gemini Man with Will Smith. He was an agent. Oh, he was a hitman, sniper. And he was ready to retire from the Secret Service. And they wanted to get rid of him like they a lot of times do with their assets. And in the meantime, they had made a clone of him, matched his DNA and made a clone of him. So they sent the clone out to kill him, because the clone was like an updated version of him. And I thought it was interesting because, and then they finally got together to work together, and they didn't, kill each other, but they worked together, the clone and the Will Smith original. And I just see that Duane is right now working with Duane, D-W-A-N-E, from an organization that will help possibly with the bonds. So Duane is helping Duane to get this done. It's just kind of a confirmation that you see sometimes, waking dreams, some people call it. But you get these hints and clues in the physical a lot of times of what's going on if you're paying attention. So that to me was like a little confirmation that things are going ahead. And then we can also have different, we can run different bodies too. Like Paul Twitchell once said, we can run more than one body. And our consciousness, or our awareness, that is, has, ability to be everywhere. Like you mentioned, Kevin, all, the agreement aspect, and even agreement to someone's associate links you to the associate, to the original person. So we're all linked together, and it's the awareness that sees the overall viewpoint of everything, and we're not separated. And we have access to these other aspects of the simulator. And the last thing, protesting and petitioning. I just got a petition today about stopping the nuclear war, and it's the Dalai Lama is advocating it, and other people. And I wrote back to this person, this just doesn't work. In my view, protesting and petitioning the jailers, so to speak, in a way you're just agreeing to them. Better to create a new position, step outside of that attitude, and create something new. If they lose your support, they have nothing anymore. So create something original and unique, because the system is the house always wins. It's been infected from the get-go. This person was talking about basically, this is the United States, the Constitution, and going through the organization here. And the Constitution, from the original part, it was infected in a way. It looks good, but its intent was different than what people think. So we can create an intent through our pure intent and sincere intent, something better here in this physical and other levels of creation. So yeah, that's it, Kevin. Thank you. Well, you're right on with the millions of people that potentially here will be have the chance to wake up an opportunity to wake up, especially if we get these projects going and people will see what there is more going on. Because right now, a lot of people don't see us, don't see it's not just us, but just they don't see their own potential or what else there could be. They're going to God, the God idea, and the spirit, and the source, and they don't know where to go. So there's no options for them right now, either here or the other side. So if nothing else, we give them options. They have their options to make better decisions, to have more, imagination and creativity so they can do better for themselves. Okay, thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next time on the New Kevin Smith, The Great Witness Show. New you.